Hey there, so a long time ago, Rob and I made a video talking about the first season of Disenchantment, and I realized second season came out, I think, pretty quick, right? Given how long anime shows take to make, especially ones as detailed and expensive as this is. And I just kind of want to give my thoughts on it. Rob's not caught up on it yet, and it's been a while since it came out. But I just thought I'd give my initial thoughts, because one of the big things we were talking about with the first season is it'd be interesting to see where the second season goes, because this is one of the first times Matt Groening show has set up kind of a continuing story. The keyword being kind of, but we'll get to that. But for those that missed it, I liked the first season, but it was a little shaky. I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more focused on a continuing story, kind of like how other Netflix shows do it. But I liked overall. And now with the second season, just quick, real fast, like just one sentence sum up. I like it. I did think it was funnier than the first. I thought it did have more character and more of a continuing story. But it also has going back to where everything started. And you're kind of stuck there. You're stuck in dreamland. And it's interesting, because watching it, and a part of me was kind of disappointed with that, but then there's another part of me that was thinking a bunch of stuff. One of them being that this time around, the episodes are more interesting and more funny. I thought the characters were a little bit more figured out, and especially in the first couple episodes where there is kind of this continuing story, there's some interesting arcs happen, and like some definite changes that happen with some characters where I'm like, okay, now that's not the same character now from season 1, which I like, or at least a big development has happened, where it kind of alters them a little bit. So I really like that. And the jokes seem a lot tighter and a lot funnier. Of course, they're not all gonna hit, but I mean, if they don't hit, they're still likable, if that makes sense. When you watch like the old Simpsons episodes, not everyone is going to get a big laugh, but you like the character so much and you like the way it's delivered, you're okay with it because you just like being with this character. And it's kind of the same thing here. I'm enjoying being with these characters. And thinking back to just how animated shows are done, a part of me realized one of the reasons they're probably coming back to this place, home, so be it, in Dreamland, is that I'm thinking to myself, anytime you change the location in any show, it's gonna cost money because you need to design it, you need to create new characters, you need to know how it works. And unlike a sitcom where you can just make a set and that's it, for a show, I mean, you may have to set up the whole land pretty much. You may have to show like the whole world there, and you may have to have different places you can go to. Now that's what's great about animation, is you can kind of go anywhere. You look at something like Futurama and man, they just went all over the place, but they still came back to Planet Express. There was still a place for them to come back to. There was still a home for them to return to. Where with this one, because the only continuing story that was in Futurama, you could argue, was the romance between Fry and Leela, which I didn't really get into. That felt a little The Office-y to me, but I know people that did. You did great. Where with this one, the continuing story was really intriguing, and it's kind of this big mystery where with Fry and Leela, it's like, well, they will or they won't, and you can make a pretty educated guess what they will. But with this, you don't always know where it's going, and it leads to interesting changes in the characters and interesting developments. You'd be like, oh, I didn't think that character would do that, or I didn't think that character would react this way. So the first, I say, 4 episodes really focus in on that, on kind of this continuing story. I mean, the last one leaves on a cliffhanger, and almost literally, and you have them very much following through with that, and it seems like it's going to go in this direction where it's just going to go from different land to different land and different experience to different experience, but it doesn't, and I don't think that's like a big spoiler or anything, but it does eventually come back to Dreamland. You can see that in the trailers and everything, in the commercials. And again, thinking back to how a lot of shows work, there is kind of this setup. When somebody pitches a show, they're like, okay, here's the idea for the show, and I want this to be the initial idea, the initial setup. Sometimes that's changed. sometimes it starts off as one thing and kind of becomes another, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. Here I feel like they had this idea, they weren't really sure if they wanted it to be one long continuing story, if they want it to be episodic, so they kind of try both, and I think they went a little bit more with the continuing story, but they don't want to stray away from the episodic stuff, and again, it's kind of hard to blame them because the show was a hit. And it's something where, because it did well, you're like, well, which one was that? So let's play around a bit. But it also very much could be that's just what they had in mind from the beginning. They wanted it to be episodic. They want this world to be really developed. And even that world kind of changes a bit as the show goes on. So I like that too. It seems like this season, even though they don't fully go with one continuing mysterious story throughout the whole thing, they still had changes constantly happening, and they're changes that they hold on to, and they're changes that can kind of reflect what's going on in our society too, but not, I don't know, not quite to a point where it's too preachy, which I like. Like, it's something you can watch years later and still enjoy and not be like, well, what's this about? You can still watch it and enjoy it. And even some of the stuff they talk about is kind of timeless too. So yeah, while I do wish there was more of just constantly going to different places and not always going back to, the one fantasy land that they stay in, it didn't bother me as much as I thought in this one. I think because the characters were more fleshed out, there was more changes that happened with them, where we find out more about them, and there is still that mystery there, and it's more in this season than it was in the first one, where the first one, it's kind of dab a little bit here and there, and then big time at the end. This one, it's big time in the beginning, like I said, the first 3 or 4 episodes, and then it steps back and it'll drop little dabs here and there, but then it'll also do like new things with the land that they're in and sort of try some different stuff with the characters too, and some big changes happen. And then once again, it comes in big at the end once more. So yeah, I think the second season is stronger, and I do still want to see where it's going to go. Again, the ending of this one ends on a cliffhanger, and it's interesting. I like seeing a Simpsons-style show. That's really the only way to call it, But, they're designed like them. It's Matt Groening and stuff. But I like the idea of this, not only this continuing story, but characters that can kind of change over time. And it's like a slow change, but they are evolving, which I really, really like. And, again, that's something I don't think I ever really got out of Futurama, which I think they were trying. I like Futurama, by the way. I do like that show. But that's something where I felt like they were maybe, they had this idea for these characters, and then they were, trying to mature them a little bit, but it never felt genuine, never quite felt real. The best stuff with them is when they're just being funny. And there's definitely some heartfelt moments, don't get me wrong. I mean, like the stuff with the dog and everything. Anything in Futurama that was, particularly dark, but also, heartfelt and heartbreaking usually worked. They had that, that kind of depressing cynicism down, but it's also it feels genuine somehow. Where when they tried to do something, usually with romance, most of the time it didn't hit for me. Again, everybody's different. Where with this one, God, I don't even know. Is there even a romance in this? I don't know if there is. Isn't that funny in a fairy tale? you would think there is. But I kind of dig that. It's maybe because we already saw that in Futurama, and, whether you liked it or hated it, you already saw it. Here, they're not doing that as much. The new sort of avenue to take is sort of this mystery involving Bean's family and sort of this other land and this giant conspiracy and stuff like that. That leads to a lot of interesting conflicts. And on the way, it's pretty funny. And we do go to places, we go to hell and stuff like that, and all these different, swamplands and such. So even though it's not all one continuing story, I was all right with it because they did constantly keep changing things up, and they did alter things a little bit, and in a way where it felt like it was progressing, even though they're not always going to a different land, or it's on the main mystery that they were talking about, with the mother and so forth. There's still stuff that's progressing, so I thought this turned out pretty good. I want to see more. It's not something where I'm just like, ooh, super excited what's going to happen next, but at the same time, it's like I'd feel bad. Like, if I found out the show stopped now, I'd be like, oh, like, I want to see more. I want to see what happens. So I'm interested to see how it evolves more. I'm hoping that's what they do. I mean, it seems like that's what they're going to do. And I'm also not against the idea of them constantly coming back to Dreamland now. To, like, this is the Planet Express that they always come back to, kind of thing. And sometimes they're episodic, because sometimes you do want an episode to stand on its own. But because the reason I think it works here more than in the first season is because, again, I feel like there's definite evolving of characters in this season. Even if they're stuck in Dreamland, there's still this sense that the characters are changing, they're growing up, they're, turning into something different than what they were in the first episode. So I really, really like that. So yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, go check it out. I don't know what people are, I haven't seen comments or anything, I don't know what people are thinking of the second season. If you don't hear people going insane, that usually means people like it fine. But actually, that's not true. There's some shows that people like go nuts over, they love so much. So I feel like this show, I'm sure some people absolutely love it. I haven't seen a ton of that, but at the same time, it's like, I do enjoy it. And I think sort of the balance of episodic and continuing story they have right now is pretty decent. I like the continuing stuff more, but it's not a bad balance they have right now. And I'm curious to see what they do in the third season. Last I heard, weren't they greenlit for 2 seasons, I think? After the first one, so 3 altogether. So yeah, so I'm curious to see where they're gonna keep going with it. And yeah, I enjoy it. I'd love to know if you enjoy it too. I don't know if this is pissing people off or if they love it or if they're somewhere in between. So let me know your thoughts. And also, do you like it, the balance they have now of episodic and a continuing story, or do you wish it be one or the other? Maybe you don't like the continuing story. I don't know. So let me know your thoughts, and I will see you next time. Take care.